Good morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee. I'm your moderator, John North. John Becker is away. It's Sunday morning and we thought we would talk about, right before the election, something called political civility, which hasn't been doing so well so far. And we've invited two men who know very well what it is to exist in politics. They are both members of Congress, retired now from Tennessee. I want to welcome them. We have Davis and Van Hilleary. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Got a great discussion that we want to pursue, but first let me introduce our panelists. On the right, we've got Don Bosch, who is an attorney and a Democrat. Don?
Good morning, John. Nice to be here.
Okay.
I'm well so far.
All right. 2 days to the election, I think, if my math is correct.
Very excited.
Also, Eddie Smith, a Republican, a former state lawmaker, and now with Child Help.
Yes, and the Knox County Election Commission, so go vote on Tuesday.
That's right, that's right. A man of many hats.
Yes.
So, folks, we have been talking about doing this kind of a show for about 5 weeks, and we thought who would be great men who can they can sit there and get along. They both have great hair, so they already look really good, and they have great experience when it comes to politics. One is a Democrat and one is a Republican. I'm really curious to hear what they have to say about political civility. Van Hilleary, you were in Congress representing District 4 from about, 95, I think, to 03?
Correct, that's right.
And then Davis, you were in from what it was about?
It was 2003 to 2011.
2003. So let's start with you, if we could, Mr. Hilleary. Just your thoughts about what is wrong, or if you agree with that. You are also, by the way, Chief of Staff for Congressman John Rose out of the 6th District in Tennessee,
correct,
which is that kind of northern middle part of Tennessee. So you still get to see what Washington looks like. What are your thoughts about civility these days?
There's not much of it. There's a lot of reasons for that, I think. First off, I used to tell people all the time that it's set up to be civil, but not, but it's still set up to be adversarial. And, it never was supposed to be kumbaya singing around the campfire. But it's sort of like a court of law, and that's how you get the best legislation. But it should be civil, and I would say that I'd say the internet's a big piece of it. Congress, if nothing else, is reflective of society, and in society, in my view at least, the internet has we don't have a new equilibrium post-internet. We don't know exactly how to handle all of it, and whether it's your middle schooler who doesn't get to go to the party and all her friends got invited and they post it on social media, or you extrapolate that to society as a whole. It's certainly, you see that in Congress, and people, because of the internet, get rewarded for poor behavior.
And it's immediate too. I mean, it's like that.
It is.
Mr. Davis, your thoughts?
I think there are two or three things that have happened in recent years that's brought about the lack of civility. I think when the Fairness Doctrine was not repealed but was allowed to expire in the late 80s, and we saw just an unbelievable amount of AM talk shows that were not advocating one side or the other, but advocating what particular side they were there for. And many of those conversations were held. It was pretty harsh, I think. And so I think the influx and the perpetuation of large numbers of talk shows, local ones, even Nashville had theirs, Knoxville had theirs, places even as small as Cookville had their talk show host.
We're a kinder, gentler show, Lincoln.
Yeah.
So
we are a kinder, gentler here today, I think.
You also have the 24-hour news cycle, which arose about 1980.
I think Fox TV didn't have. I don't think they were there until like 96 or 97 in Washington. I don't think they had a bureau until 96, 97. It was CNN basically that had pretty much all of the media as far as
some would say
TV.
A different CNN than today.
Well, it was a different CNN than today. But it's the only one. I mean, they weren't necessarily. I think today when you look at cable TV, you're seeing structured news. There's a message they want you to get. It's not about what happened today.
News, wouldn't that be fair?
Pardon?
Editorialized news.
Editorializing almost on whether it's MSNBC, whether it's CNN, or whether it's Fox or Newsmax or whatever it may be. I think there's an awful lot of editorializing. Talk radio still has a major part, but the blogs that we see today, I mean, the proliferation of just continual messaging of, I'm a Southern Baptist, so I don't want to say hate, but it's a challenge to anyone who wants to be civil. If they start reading what's on the internet, it just encourages you to be hostile. And I think the second thing I'm sorry.
No, you go.
I think the second thing is money. And when Citizens United, that decision made in 2009,
United States Supreme Court,
we started seeing not hundreds of dollars, not millions of dollars, but billions of dollars being spent for advocacy for an ideological belief of both sides.
Well, I'd love to go back and just get both of your views. I mean, one of the things that we see, as you mentioned, is post-internet, is the fact that everyone now has a TV studio in their pocket, their phone. And what used to be able to happen where y'all, what we call making the sausage, where you're having to negotiate behind the scenes, all that now is done in public, so no one can really come together in the middle because they have to stay on their talking points 24/7 because of the proliferation of Twitter and Facebook and just that constant news cycle. So, like, how do you go about helping Congress fix that when they can't even have those moments to really debate issues to work towards solutions?
I don't know. When I was there as a member, it was still pretty much. It was already kind of it was 24 news cycle. It was quick. Mm-hmm. I know we're trying to solve a problem in Cookeville right now with. I'm going to tell you the parties, but we were making good progress, and then someone leaked it out, and we couldn't get any further because then it stopped it right there, and we were solving it behind the scenes, but then it went away, and so we're back to square one.
Sunday morning inside Tennessee, 2 days before a rather big election. And Van Hilleary, you said you had another thought you wanted to share with us in regards to why maybe we're not seeing it so much.
Well, I think another factor is that we used to have blue dog Democrats like
Yes,
Lincoln,
sir.
and they no longer exist really. And we used to have more liberal Republicans, and they don't really exist anymore to speak of. And when you're trying to pass a big piece of legislation, if you can get an ideological majority, it doesn't necessarily have to be a partisan majority, then neither party can rear back and just start beating on it from day one. You can kind of get a deal, but that's gone now. And so, for example, Obamacare was not a single Republican vote. If they'd been willing to move just a little bit to the,
They actually got one. He was from Louisiana. He replaced.
If they had been able to move just a little bit to the right,
Mm-hmm.
they'd got about 30 Republicans probably, and then it wouldn't have been a punching bag.
Van, it's still there, and the Republicans, even when they've had control, can't get rid of it.
Well, I don't think the Republicans made a real effort. I mean, it was always, it's awful. Then when we got the chance, they didn't have a plan B.
Van, you touched on something when you talk about the, I guess, the polarization of parties, we'll call it, where we don't have the blue dogs, we don't have moderate Republicans. And I think Lincoln hit on one of my points on why it's so bad right now, and that's the dark money, the Citizens United, corporations, and unknown parties can give unlimited and can give out-of-state and in-state races. And I think that's a real problem. I think
Citizens United, I wish it hadn't been decided that way.
Yeah.
It may or may not have been the right decision from a constitutional standpoint. It was a 5-4 decision. So obviously smarter people than us differ on that. But the thing is, it really did open up this whole thing about, if someone gives me $100 and they say, go get them, buddy, that's great. But if someone gives me through a third party, wink, wink, nod, nod, but it's their $10 million.
That's right.
They generally want something for it.
and they're not even from your district, your state, your region. And Tom Ingram, fine Republican, he and I have talked about this many times. We kind of think it's
When did Tom become a Republican?
He would be one of those moderate Republicans.
Okay.
To my point, I think that, don't you think that gerrymandering, and Lincoln's a bit of a victim of that, gerrymandering has caused that run to the edges, and that's a problem because there's no more general elections, very few, particularly in Congress. There are just primaries, and you have to be worried about being primary to your hard right or your hard left. How much trouble or how much blame do you place on gerrymandering? Both parties have done it. The Republicans found computer algorithms and whatever, and just happened to be at the time they were in charge. They have largely been more effective because of that. But how much of a problem do you think that is?
I think you've always had gerrymandering.
But it's better now.
Well, the difference is you got computers and get it right down to the
voter, to the house.
Nats, whatever, But I mean, you can get it right down to the precinct and to the street and to the whatever. It's another issue that you have to deal with. I mean, there's so many things that seem to be coming together right now that we just haven't seemed to be able to solve. But I think over time we will solve most of these things. And I hope it's not a crisis that causes us to solve it, because crisis kind of forces the compromise. I hope we can have some compromise before that happens.
We actually saw some of that play out in the Tennessee legislature in this last election cycle. In the primaries, folks who may not have been supporting the voucher program they were primaried by someone, and some state senators actually lost. So I mean, it's playing out
with
here.
money coming in from all over the country to fund that candidate.
It's money coming in because they're going to gain from it as the end result.
And you know,
and students may gain from it as well, but I'm just saying their purpose is to gain from it financially.
That's right.
And they're saying it's to help the students, and it may or may not, but it's going to help their pocketbook in the bottom line. That's a part of what's happening today as well. I'll give you a little example. I went to Washington in January 2003. In December, the Bush administration proposed what we now know as a prescription drug bill. I'd sent a letter out into the district I was representing saying you shouldn't have to choose between medicine and your food. And so I'm getting pressure from the White House, which is Bush, and pressure from our Democrat leaders to not vote for the bill, and from the White House to vote for it. And I went home and my wife said, how can you not vote for it? Remember that letter you sent out? And so I was one of the first 10 Democrats that voted for that. And it was still failing by 2 or 3 votes. And it had very similar proposals in that prescription drug bill that Democrats in previous years had put up. So it's both sides.
That's right.
So ultimately I voted for the bill. And then when it came to Obamacare, I had 6,500 people contact me during that debate in 2009. 500 some were for it. 6,000 almost was opposed to it. I didn't have a choice. If I represent the people like I say I'm going to, that's in our Constitution. It says the member of the House is the direct representative of the people that he represents. And so if I'd voted for the bill, I think I'd have broke my Constitution.
May I throw one other piece of this
Go ahead.
out for discussion? And this may not be something you agree with, but back in the day, you had conservative Republicans, liberal Democrats. A lot of liberal Democrats have been replaced with progressive Democrats. And give me a good liberal Democrat any old day, as opposed to so-called progressive Democrats, simply because I felt like the liberal Democrats, we all love the country, we all have the same goals, just believe different ways of getting there.
So do the progressives.
Progressives don't like the country we have it today. They'd like to kind of tear it down, a lot of the traditional things, and rebuild something that's different. And it's hard. I witness it every week, and it's just hard to get a deal with someone whose goals are so different.
You're right. We disagree about that.
I knew it.
Well, but I'm going to have to kind of join in. About 15% of the people say that they are liberal, that left-wing part of what the Democratic Party has today. Some of those may be Republicans, but most of the majority would be liberal Democrats. The rest are people like us who just want to make things happen, who love our country, who want to work together. I mean, we like our neighbors, we got friends, but that left wing of the Democratic Party, it's either going to be their way or the highway.
I disagree with you also.
And that's okay.
We have to
agree with you both.
On this moment, I'm going to ask you a question. You don't have to give me a prolonged answer, but I am curious what you think. It has come to the point where one party, when we're in the middle of a campaign, will not come on and do appearances with the other candidate, doesn't want to appear at the same time with them. I don't think that's the way it always used to be. I mean, my goodness, we wouldn't have had Lincoln-Douglas debates if suddenly Lincoln had decided not to appear with Stephen Douglas. I'm curious about your thoughts, since you both have run for office many times before, about this very clear decision to just not take part in appearances in a situation like this with an opponent. Let me start with you, Van Hilleary.
Well, part of that's because you don't have the competition because of gerrymandering and other things.
That's right.
So they don't feel the need. That's one. Two, there's a lot of ways to get your message out now besides the old gatekeepers that were pretty limited, which would be local news stations like this one and network news.
So why bother?
So why bother? Now, from a conservative standpoint, I'll also say that we feel like that we often don't get a fair shake. And so, whether it's the rules of that last debate where they say we're not going to check your facts as we go, and then they did, whatever it is, we feel like we often don't get a fair shake. And so that's one of the reasons. But all of the above, but I think the public does suffer from that. There's no doubt about it.
I think the public deserves both candidates for president on a podium, separated from each other, 2 or 3 debates to where that we can see how they act under pressure. We can get their ideas. They're put under pressure where they have to perform, and they're cheating the American voter when they don't do that. And I'm sad that happens.
So go ahead, Eddie.
Well, and one of the things that I think about is the long history in Tennessee that we've had of statesmen over politicians. I think about, Howard Baker, Governor Bredesen, Governor Haslam, the 2 gentlemen sitting here, both of you all. How do we get back to, a time period where we've got statesmen that are actually wanting to serve over politicians who are just running for the next election?
And I'll piggyback on Eddie's comment because I think it's good. Issues versus people. We're attacking individuals, not issues. How do we get back to issues?
People before politics. I hear a lot of political folks say that, but then I look at how they represent us, and they aren't telling us the truth. It's politics before people to them, and so I wish we could get back to that. We have had some great states in Tennessee. I can go through the list of Republicans. Howard Baker Jr.
Absolutely.
was a great one. I've always admired him. Haslam, Bill Haslam was Bredesen.
Ned McWhorter.
Lost a good one with Winfield Dunn the other day.
Winfield Dunn, who just
Winfield
passed.
Dunn was a great one. I'm kind of sad that Tennessee is not producing, and I'm not taking this away from anyone, the great statesmen starting at the lower level all the way up to the top in Tennessee, the governor, that we've been producing. And I think one of the reasons being is that money's a problem. I talked to Jim Henry, it's been about 7 or 8 years ago, and he said, Lincoln, people like you and I will never be able to run for office again. He said, we're not rich enough. He said, if you don't have a bunch of money, you cannot run for office in Tennessee or any other area.
Well, there's a belief that Bill Haslam didn't run for the Senate because he wasn't conservative enough. He had plenty of money. But I mean, again, that goes to the.
It's not just liberal versus conservative.
Right.
It's not just that continuum. It's sort of establishment versus.
That's right.
Reformer, disruptor, whatever. Disruption is okay if it's not just disruption for disruption's sake, right? I mean, sometimes things do need to be shaken up a bit, but you don't just shake them up just to be shaken up.
For the sake of shaking.
That's right.
I agree.
And we have a lot of that going on.
Well, I guess to put a capstone on it, do you think if we get through this election, whoever wins the presidency, I have both, of course, a personal choice and a belief, which they correspond with each other. Do you think that we're going to get to a spot where Congress, and it's going to be very close, whether it's going to be controlled by the Republicans or controlled by the Democrats, that we're going to be able to work together? And I know it's a function both of the executive branch and the legislative branch. Do you think we'll ever get back to that? Because right now, we're in a pretty bad place in terms of really getting meaningful things done, and we've seen that. Do you think we can get back to that after this election's over? I'll start with you, Van. You're there.
I think it's going to be tough for a while.
What's a while?
Well, it's going to be tough for at least a cycle or two, I think.
Lincoln?
I think with the margins of the day after day, no more than 4 or 5 for the majority. In the Senate, it's pretty much even. I just don't see that happening because the pressure from the ideological folks on both parties are going to put pressure to at least a portion of those senators and House members, Democrat and Republican, to refrain from gathering with the other side. And I think that's sad.
Let me throw out this what-if scenario. Let's say the Republicans win the White House, the Senate, and the House. What about the other party in that situation?
They'll be just like they were when Bush was president.
Filibuster's still going to be here. And so,
listen, I was sitting on the store front on the second day of voting, and I voted, and this lady, 2 ladies and their husband stopped. And she said, I noticed you voted. I hope you voted for her. And she mentioned the candidate. I said, well, I usually don't discuss who I vote for. So she continued, and finally she went inside and came back. She said, I know who you voted for. They told me who you are. And I said, well, you really don't know who I voted for because I haven't told you, so you really don't know. But I told her this. I said, look. She said, well, if one of them wins, we won't have a country. And I said, look, 4 years from now, I hope you come back down here, and we'll still be a country.
You'll still get to vote.
We'll still be a country. We'll still be. Your candidate may or may not win, or my candidate may or may not win, and you and I may have the same candidate as far as you know. But we'll still be a country 4 years from now. If we have this program and Van and I are here 6 years from now, we'll still have a country because we, the people, will make it happen. We're not going to let any politician destroy our country.
Van Hilleary, Lincoln Davis, we truly appreciate you taking the time this Sunday morning, and I think the audience heard some great thoughts And let's just see what happens Tuesday. I hope everything goes well, no matter what happens. All right, we are taking one more break, and then we'll come back and we'll do a little political talk around, and we will remember a dear colleague. All right, there you are. If you didn't know it now, I'm about to tell you. Election Day is Tuesday morning. In some parts of our viewing area, polls are open 7 to 7. In some parts of our viewing area, they're open 8 to 8. We've got Eddie Smith, who's going to talk a little bit about that. I've got that right, Eddie. We've got polls depending on where you are in the time zone.
Correct. It's 8 to 8 Eastern time,
And
7 to 7
Plateau.
on the Central time zone.
So our folks on the Plateau are going to see it then.
And you know what we've seen through the early voting, both early voting and absentee, we've exceeded our high water mark of 2020. So really, you know, there's still about 170,000 eligible voters that can go vote on Election Day.
170,000.
And again, that's all voters in Knox County. So we really need people to go vote.
Yeah.
You know, my grandfather, all of our military before us died and sacrificed so that we have this right to go vote. So, so please exercise. It takes 5 minutes to really go vote. So go find your polling place on Election Day between 8 and 8 and let your voice be heard.
Yeah, I can't stress how important it is to vote. And I voted earlier this week and voted early in the courthouse. And I'm just always appalled at those that don't vote. And don't vote in the smaller elections. This is a major election. We'll get a mark above probably 50%. But it's troubling. Go vote. And folks, Tuesday night, I'll tell everybody right now, Susan and I and you, John, and John Becker will all be here. We'll be pontificating and watching and trying to inform the public, but we're not going to know. I'll be shocked if we know. I think there'll be some bellwether marks and there'll be some tea leaves we can read, but we're probably not going to have an answer till sometime late Wednesday, maybe even Thursday.
Sort of like 2020 was. I think that was a late night as well.
It may have been Friday before we found out on that one.
That's right. So let's shift to talking about a very good friend to this TV station as well as this program. His name was Dennis Francis. He was an attorney here in Knoxville, very well known for many decades. We knew that Dennis had been sick, and I hate to tell you that we were deeply fearful that he would pass, and we learned last week that he had passed. He succumbed to cancer. It has been a very tough week for those of us who knew him and for people here, and just love it to hear a little bit of your thoughts about Dennis. Eddie?
You know, I got to know Dennis very little. He was on the show one time when I was running, and then I got to serve on the panel with him a couple of times. And I found him much like Don. You know, I hope everybody at home doesn't have a heart attack. You know, they are incredible gentlemen. You know, great. They've become great friends. And honestly, I'm going to miss being on the show with him. Don, stay around with us for a little while.
Doing my best.
But you know, it's deeply sad that when we lose someone like that in our community, it affects so many people. So really just praying for his family, praying for his friends with what they're going through right now.
Have about 30 seconds, Don.
I've known Dennis for 40 years, and this was hard. Dennis has been a friend, a mentor. We've worked together on so many things. There are so many things that Dennis has done in his life that people don't know about. Just kindness. He's raised a bunch of his grandchildren.
That's right.
Gary Wade, former justice of the Supreme Court, he said he's one of the last great street lawyers. He kind of knew a little about everything, and he'd help anybody for a nickel or $1 million.
We appreciate that. We appreciate you watching. We're going to go out with one shot that remembers Dennis. A little whiskey, a shot glass, and there's Dennis. See you next week.